Hello and welcome to Overtime. We, at this point, have a strong reason to believe that the Nordstream pipelines 1 and 2 have been sabotaged and are leaking into the Baltic. They are leaking natural gas. We have actually a photo here, so let's put this up. It's methane. Apologies. That's methane that is bubbling up to the surface there. That is about zero point 0.6 miles across, a little over, I think, 1 kilometer. There are 3 leaks. The Sweden's National Seismic Network registered 2 explosions. We believe there may have been 3, but at this point we can confirm only 2 explosions near now these leaks on Nord Stream 1 and 2. We're going to discuss why that's important and what these pipelines do.
I could have, because it took her a long time to pull over.
And then, hold on a sec. Apologies. I think
She could have, because when I was
on the background. All right, perfect. So, I believe it was the Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, who has called these events an act of sabotage, while the Danish Prime Minister has said that she simply could not rule out sabotage. They were actually in the process of opening a symbolic opening, a yellow pipe long part of the new Baltic pipe, which is going to bring Norway's gas to Denmark and through the Baltic Sea to Poland. They were in the process of opening that when they heard of these explosions. At this point, it looks credible that this is, in fact, sabotage. Again, there were multiple underground explosions. The pipes had been shut off. Putin, in retaliatory sanctions, and sanctions specifically against Germany, these pipes run from Russia to Germany as retaliation for the sanctions against Russia. Putin shut these pipes down, cutting off a significant amount of the energy to Germany. But the assumption was that he could always turn these pipes back on, and would at some point, in particular if Germany stopped supporting the war in Ukraine and or if the sanctions against him were lifted. It appears like that may not be an option to the best of our understanding. So what they do is they keep the natural gas in the pipes. The reason they keep them in the pipes is there's actually no real threat of explosion while they're in the pipes. The pipes are far underwater, and it keeps the seawater out. If the seawater gets into the pipes, it can corrode the pipes and it does significant damage. So the pipes, even while they're off, the methane is kept inside those pipes. That methane is now spilling out. Again, we have, let me bring that picture back up. Actually, ideally, maybe we could put that picture, not there. Let's put that picture in the center. Is it going to go in the center? The picture is not going to cooperate, so there you go. We'll put the picture right there. There is at least 2 of these in the Baltic Sea right now. They are extremely dangerous. The gas can detonate, especially once it gets up into the air. Let me, all right, stand by one. We've got a lot of information coming in here. All right. Okay. Geopolitical has a correction, and I appreciate that. The Nord Stream 2 pipeline was Germany actually refused to put it online. It was completed right before the war, war in Ukraine, and it was supposed to be turned on, and Germany refused and shut it off on their end. If I can, if I remember correctly. So, but at this point, it looks like both of these are badly damaged. In fact, the damage has been described as catastrophic by one of the monitors of the pipe. We don't know. I mean, they built these things, so obviously on some level it's got to be recoverable. But once seawater goes into these pipes, it may be the only thing you can do is rip out all of the pipes and start from scratch. So it may be that the entire project is in fact in jeopardy. So we've got a couple of other things. Depending on the scale of damage, the leaks could mean a permanent closure of both lines. The pipes were designed in such a way that they would not be easily accidentally damaged, and leaks are extraordinarily rare. And again, we do have the seismologists picking up significant explosions before these leaks. At this point, the Kremlin spokesman is saying that they cannot rule out sabotage, and that this is, quote, an unprecedented situation which requires urgent investigation. We are extremely worried by this news. Let's see, I believe it was, I want to get this right because I don't want to just start misquoting people. There was an initial quote that this was, okay, yeah, so there was no reports of earthquake activity. I believe it was somebody in Germany who said that essentially, you know what, I'm going to get it's a somewhat inflammatory quote, so let me get the who said it before I just go around quoting it and throwing people's names. The suggestion was that this is opening up a sort of a new front, that this was Russia opening up a new front of war against Europe. Now, again, both these pipelines were closed, so we're going to have to discuss what the possibilities are and why. And to that end, with me is Zandering. And I do want to point out that right now gas prices are up. I think 15% was the number I saw already, just based on the damage done to these lines, and they weren't even running. So we're going to keep an eye on that. But with me today is Zandering. Zandering, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing okay-ish.
So, welcome to you. You had said this earlier. Whenever I call, it's like, okay, what's going on? Who's died? What's blown up? Who's? What
major catastrophe has happened now?
Yeah, I don't normally call with good news. So, thank you for joining us. And what are your? Let me actually, before the way I see it, the initial suspects for this are Russia. Doing this either to damage security, especially energy security for Germany and or the EU, and to not have to pay the fees for keeping the pipeline shut down and not fulfilling any contractual obligations on their end. If the pipeline is destroyed, they're no longer responsible for keeping it down. Also, possibly as a false flag in order to gin up, and I think he needs false flags right now, to gin up pro-Russian sentiment, depending on how this project is viewed culturally by the Russians, which I don't know. The next possibility strikes me as being some kind of ultranationalist in Germany, somebody in Germany who wishes to see German energy independence, which Germany has been talking about. The EU and the US have strongly advocated for and said we would help with, and to destroy the pipeline, to make to eliminate the possibility of leverage by Russia over Germany using this pipeline. Or C, some Ukrainian or pro-Ukrainian group that is either attempting to blame Russia for the attack or also wishes to eliminate the possible leverage that this pipeline could be used for. Anyways, on the surface of it, those are the options that I see. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, there's other options. It's just they seem incredibly unlikely. So I don't see why we would even bring some. I mean, because it could just be random terrorist people deciding, hey, there's a pipeline, let's blow it up while it's not running huge amounts of gas through it. I mean, my understanding was Nordstream 1 was running at 20%. I thought they were still supplying, but at only 20%.
That actually may be accurate. I've forgotten exactly what the status of Nordstream 1 was. Geopolitical corrected me, and he is, of course, correct. Nordstream 2 never actually went online. It was supposed to. It was finished right before the war, and Germany decided not to do it. And in fact, we covered that. So, it may be if Geopolitical is still in the live chat, he may be able to fill us in on what the status of Nord Stream 1 was. But anyways, thank you for that correction. So please continue.
Yeah, so I mean, it seems like that's probably the three options. I mean, the very, very, very way distant is, some anti-West that just wants to hurt the European continent for some reason. And they just saw this was a great way of doing it and deflecting any kind of direct attention to them, though generally those groups like to claim responsibility. And so I think that it's more likely the three options that you kind of laid out is much more likely.
All right. Is there one that you prefer?
I'm actually a little surprised this didn't happen earlier. I mean, you had brought up some good points when I mentioned that I was surprised this hadn't happened earlier. I'm still leaning towards Russia is ultimately responsible, though they probably didn't do it themselves. They probably hired somebody to do it. And one of the things you have to realize is, this is an underwater demolition. So you need to be able to have the kinds of equipment and expertise to be able to go down, find the pipeline, go down there, and then plant explosives that will work underwater and blow the pipeline. So that does kind of limit things. Another reason why I don't think that it's just some random extremist group, because they generally don't have that kind of expertise, knowledge, and equipment to do all that stuff. So, I think that we're talking about somebody with either extensive resources or a nation state funding some organization doing it, private organization to do it.
So my thinking is there aren't any good options. I would place the odds of Russia doing this at about 40%. Some misguided pro-Germany group at probably 30%, and another reasonably misguided pro-Ukraine group at 30%. So of all of the possibilities, Russia's the plurality. It's the largest at 40%, but it still isn't the majority probability. It's probably more likely. The problem is I don't see this helping Russia in very many ways. It helps Russia in as much as they may be off the hook for the fees that they have to pay for the pipeline that they are not running. They currently really can't use the pipeline in any meaningful way. They can't make any revenue off the pipeline in any meaningful way, so it's just a loss to them. However, we believe that Putin's current strategy in the war is to hold out until winter. Yes, hold out until winter, which is remarkable because I don't think his military can survive the winter. The Ukrainian ones, we believe, can. Having said that, we think that his goal is that at winter, the energy supply from Russia suddenly becomes a lot more valuable. And if Germans in particular and other EU countries in general are facing freezing to death or cutting off their support for Russia, their support for Ukraine, that will factor in their calculations, and support for Ukraine may dry up as countries are facing a brutal winter with Russian energy, one of their only options. So I think that's...
And there is some support for that, too. I mean, there have been, anti-sanction demonstrations, like through Paris, for example. because of the high energy costs, saying we need to extricate ourselves from this situation and stop trying to punish Russia because they're punishing us right back. So I mean, there is some validity to that, and that was one of the points you brought up. We're like, yeah, that is a really good point. I can't really counter it. And the only thing I can come up with, or the only thing that I immediately thought was that Russia's already decided that they're not going to get the leverage that they need out of it. That if things get bad enough in Europe, that places like the United States and some other areas that are Canada that are supplying enough gas to be able to get them through, that they're not going to be able to have that kind of leverage. The United States is going to step up and say, hey, we'll ship, we'll try and cover as much of your gas issues and make sure that you don't actually run out, so people aren't freezing to death, as long as you maintain your stance on the sanctions. So if Putin decided that, or looked at his crystal ball that he's apparently been using for this whole war, and decides that leverage isn't actually there, then there is a line of reasoning saying if we were to destroy it, then we're not responsible for completely cutting off Europe because it was some extremist group or sabotage that did this. So we can't be held responsible for completely cutting Europe off from any of our gas, period. So we don't have to worry about the backlash of the rest of the international communities looking at you saying, how cruel and heartless you are. You're willing to cut off all energy to these places and risk the lives of millions of civilians possibly freezing to death in the middle of winter. It's a pretty negative towards him. Whereas if it blows up, he's like, hey, this is not my fault. And that only holds true if he thinks that all of the potential leverage of being able to turn the gas back on has been lost. Like, he's not going to have that leverage anyway. And he also has to think that this is going to extend long enough that it's not going to bite him in the ass if the conflict is resolved and, kind of relations or trade relations start to normalize, because they won't be able to normalize the energy because of all the damage to the pipeline. They'll have to fix it first.
And that's my concern, and that's one of the reasons why this is so serious. You had said before, serious and not so serious. I think that's a good point. It's not so serious in as much as right now that those lines weren't really being used. So it's sort of like, well, what's the big deal? If this was Russia, it signifies that Putin, A, does not see any lifting of the sanctions anytime soon. He doesn't believe he's got any hope of that. We already know he's in this for the long haul. We know he's planning on sticking around, but that is, in my view, a very bad sign. It also means that, as you said, he doesn't think he can leverage the pipeline. That pipeline has been his biggest leverage against Europe. It has not been working particularly well, but it's there, and it's going to work better in the winter. It means he's decided, no, it's not going to work. Which also may mean that he's at this point willing to burn everything to the ground. He's decided he's lost. He doesn't care about he doesn't foresee any possible future where Russia is working with anybody. He doesn't see any possible future where the sanctions are lifted, and may not even see a possible future where this kind of leverage is even meaningful. That's a little nihilistic for my taste, and I'm very concerned if that's the way he's looking at things. The only other possibility is a false flag is something that he needs right now. And there's masses of people just fleeing the country ahead of his, quote, partial mobilization. And if culturally this line was something that the Russians were immensely proud of, the destruction of this line, even while not operational or not being used, may help him mobilize nationalism and national pride. Having said that, it was not my understanding that the Russians were particularly proud of this line. I'm not an expert in Russian culture, so it's entirely possible, but I hadn't heard of it. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me as a false flag. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me as to recoup the fees that they're losing on this. Russia doesn't pay its bills anyway. Russia doesn't really care what money it owes other countries. It certainly doesn't care right now. So I don't. I think they could have done it, but they're not, and they're probably the most likely of all the suspects. But even then, I couldn't. I would not go over 40% on my likelihood that they did this, because it doesn't get them a lot, and it undermines their single biggest point of leverage against the EU. Now, the EU, Germany, and all the Western countries have been trying to undermine this for quite some time, which is interesting. The US is interested in seeing Germany not be dependent on this pipeline. So we've been working very hard, and a lot of countries have been working very hard to get Germany to be independent from Russian energy. So, and Russia does not want that. This appears to help those goals. So that leads to my second suspect, which I would leave at 30%. And I had said earlier, Germany, somebody who, a misguided pro-Germany, or somebody who's just so anti-Russia they don't care about what's happening to Germany, somebody who is interested in German independence from Russia, is interested enough in that they'd be willing to sabotage the line. Could it be rogue elements in the U.S.? Because the U.S., I think, benefits from this line being destroyed. I don't think it was the U.S., but I'm talking along those lines. Rogue elements in Germany who don't want Germany to be subservient to Russia. Other rogue elements in the EU, or even Ukrainian rogue elements who, if that line's destroyed, there isn't going to be much more of a debate on whether or not Germany should assist Ukraine at the risk of their energy from Russia. That is off the table now. That is most decidedly off the table. Please.
Since we're wildly speculating, because that's really all we can do at this point, one other possibility is it's one of the Russian, or a conglomeration of the Russian oligarchs who are trying to undermine Putin and trying to pull away any kind of leverage he may have to try and get Germany to lift any of the sanctions, or at least ease them. So I mean, it's possible that I can see benefits there.
To get the sanctions lifted on the oligarchs?
No, well, not so much that, but to get the sanctions, to take away the ability for Russia to have any leverage to try and ease sanctions on Putin. I mean, granted, it's hurting them too, but they're trying to undermine Putin at any. Yeah, they're trying to undermine Putin at any point right now, and if he's able to ease sanctions against Russia, that helps, with his popularity, for one. It helps with, trying to get his economy a little bit better. It helps with him being able to sustain the war. It helps him. So if they're able to take that away from him, because as you pointed out, that's pretty much been the biggest, lever of influence that he has.
Yes.
And if anybody wanted to try and undermine Russia and couldn't go directly into Russia to do it, that might be a plausible. I'm just looking at plausible reasons that somebody may have to try and blow this up, and so it could be. And the oligarchs would have the resources to be able to hire a demolition crew, an underwater demolition crew, to go do this, because we have to remember this all happened underwater. It's in the Baltic Sea, so it's not. This isn't. You can't just hire Farmer Joe and his backhoe to go break the pipeline apart. I mean, you're going to have to send somebody with explosives underwater to go do this.
Yeah, well, and this is why I saw, like I said, immediately everybody, and we've been watching on social media, everybody's saying, "Oh my God, Putin's opened up a new war. Putin is," and it's funny because the statement out of the Kremlin was somewhat muted, but acknowledging that this was an act of sabotage, which strikes me, if they had sabotaged it, they'd either be immediately blaming somebody else, or they'd be denying it was sabotage. I'm leaning against this was Russia. I think this was somebody who wanted to hurt Russia because they needed that pipeline. That pipeline was a part of their strategy against the Ukrainians, and it wasn't working out great, but it was slated to be working better when winter came. Yeah, it's possible it was Russia. This is a Russian kind of move, absolutely. But I'm leaning against Russia at this point. Not strongly, but I'm gonna say Russia at a 40% in my view. Geostriber said, Geostriber said this on our Discord earlier too, and I think this is right. The shoot the hostage. You know, that pipeline's been the hostage. And Russia has been, wielding it somewhat effectively, and now that hostage has been shot. I'm not sure that this is, Russia did not want that hostage dead by any calculus that I know. Come join us on the Discord, by the way. We discuss these things and more, and usually the news that we air, including breaking news like this, has been discussed, and we've workshopped in the Discord before going live, this included. So come in and join us and see how we put this show together, or just hang out. We got channels on gaming, philosophy, medicine, pick a topic, and we're usually engaged on it. So all right. Yeah, the rhetoric, some of the rhetoric that we're seeing, and I think what I've seen from Germany sort of suggests that they're initially blaming the Russians. I don't think it was the Russians. So the question is, who was it? It was either somebody who was interested in damaging the Russians directly, or someone interested in eliminating this point of leverage over the EU. And that's a lot of people in that second category. Interested in damaging the Russians directly, that would be Ukraine. I'm not sure that Ukrainians have the ability to pull this off, and I don't think they have the interest in pulling this off. This doesn't seem
to directly help them very much.
No, it doesn't. And it's not the kind of, the other thing that's worth noting is this happened within, I think it was recognized national waters of, was it Denmark? I should look that up, but the part of the pipeline where this occurred actually happened. It was not in international waters, at least one of them, and that's a problem because that violates national sovereignty. So, yeah, all right. So, yeah, that's. I mean, it is. You had pointed this out earlier. It's wild speculation, but I mean, we have who it interests and who it doesn't, and the people who benefit the least that I can tell from this is Russia. They do benefit they benefit, but it's a net loss to them based on, unless there's a calculus going on I've missed. It's a net loss to them. The money that they get, they save from this, and the potential of nationalism and national sentiment heightened by this is dwarfed by the loss of holding this over Germany in particular. Germany now has no choice but to abandon any attempt at reconciling with Russia. That's it. It's done. It's done. The discussion in Germany, which the Germans have, just FYI, the Germans have, and that was why the correction was very important. The Germans decided that because of the invasion of Ukraine, they would not open the second line. So Germany has already, been, that I can tell, unwavering in their support of the sanctions. They've suffered the sanctions more than most countries and will continue to suffer those sanctions more in the winter. They now have no choice. Unless there's news, and what we had said before, and we should actually probably do a basic rundown of where we are. So the Nordstream pipes 1 and 2 are damaged. We believe they're damaged in 3 separate places. At least 2 explosions were detected by Swedish seismologists. We believe we had heard reports of 3 actual explosions, but at this point only 2 were detected. There was no other underground activity, so there were no earthquakes, nothing that would otherwise damage these lines. These lines are very strong. They are kept filled with natural gas. And the reason they're kept filled with natural gas is you don't want them empty, because if they're empty, they're more prone to leaking, and any kind of seawater that gets in there damages the lines. The inside of the lines is not protected against salt corrosion. So you do not want seawater in those lines. So the lines did have natural gas in them. That gas is now bubbling to the surface. It is extremely dangerous.
Was it natural gas or methane?
Sorry. Geostrebber said natural gas is mainly methane. The tagline on this photo here said that it was methane. So I don't know quite enough to be able to delineate the nuance of what is. I mean, my understanding was that those were natural gas. It says they are both natural gas pipelines, but that was methane that was coming out. So, at any rate, as that comes out, if they're not piping something else in, and I don't know what the status of that is, but if they're not piping something else in, that leak is going to be filled with seawater, and that will irrevocably damage large swaths of the line. There's already speculation that the lines may be so damaged at this point so as to be irreparable, and that they'd have to be essentially dismantled. That's speculation. We honestly don't know. But it does appear to be catastrophic damage, and again, if they're not going to continue to pipe the gas into those pipes, seawater is going to start filling them pretty quickly, and it may start filling them anyway. I don't know enough about the mechanics, especially down there.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the kind of manufacturer specifications for a pipeline going between Russia and Germany is. In the U.S. at least, pipelines are kept pressurized so that stuff from the outside, especially underwater pipelines, are kept pressurized specifically to keep water out. So if there is a leak, you can detect where the leak is externally very easily, and that pressure inside will keep water from intruding into the pipeline. And if there is a certain loss of pressure inside the pipeline, it will activate automatic cutouts that will seal the pipeline in sections. So if they adhere to that kind of manufacturing safety standards, then there are, as soon as the explosion's off, you would have lost an enormous amount of pressure inside the pipeline, and it should have activated automatic cutouts, which would have isolated those areas, which could also be why we had, several explosions along the length that may not have, instead of just damaging one section, they may have wanted to damage several sections. So it should have shut down and sealed itself off so that only the one section that was actually damaged. I don't know how long their sections are, but I don't know what their manufacturing standards are.
Stella Havisham, just put duct tape on it. Jeez.
Haven't you seen that Flex Seal?
Yeah, but,
even underwater, you just slap it on there and it works.
Yeah, just get a swimsuit, dive down 300 meters or however. Yeah. Well, if she's volunteering, she can go do that. I don't think I'm going to slap duct tape on that, but duct tape does. That my father-in-law, duct tape solves everything. All right, so I think we're going to be learning a lot. I mean, if the gas stops, then presumably it has been cut off at some point along the pipe. I would assume that they've got that kind of safety mechanism in place. We still don't know a whole heck of a lot about this. All we know is that there appear to be 3 leaks. There was a minimum of 2 explosions. The general consensus appears to be that it was sabotage. The damage is extremely serious. Whether it's sufficient to deem the line essentially scrapped or not, we don't know, but there's one person, I've forgotten his official position, I do apologize, I've got a couple of screens open here, but he his job was to maintain the line, and he said that he believed there was a significant chance that the line is entirely, this was sufficient to We'll
I
have to
have such a
see.
hard time believing that,
Yeah,
because that is such a vulnerable part of any pipeline. Like I said, in the United States, they have automatic shutdowns to specifically, one, protect what you spill out into the environment, but two, to protect the pipeline itself. And that if there is significant damage, especially in an underwater pipeline, especially in a saltwater one, you want to make sure that there's numerous cutoffs along the way, so that if some part of it is damaged enough that water infiltrates into the pipeline itself, well, you're going to have to replace that section of pipeline. Well, you don't want to have to replace the entire section, so you have cutouts so that that section can be isolated, and then you just need to replace that one section. So I have such a hard time believing that it's like the engineering for this pipeline is that bad, especially if it's going into Germany, that it's that bad that it would destroy, the entire pipeline, unless you strategically placed all of the charges along the entire thing so that you ruptured every single section. And that seems like an enormously complex operation to try and pull off, especially without anybody noticing that you got a big ship out there following along the pipeline. So I don't know, it stretches my credulity to think that it's that devastating that it completely destroys the entire pipeline. I mean, it certainly destroys a chunk of it, and that's not inexpensive or easy or particularly quick to replace or fix. I mean, it's still a very significant thing, but I don't know, maybe their engineering standings are just that bad.
All right, you are cutting out a bit. So we actually have a statement from Nordstream. They have confirmed that they registered a severe pressure drop on both strings of the gas pipeline. The Swedish Maritime Authority is warning ships to maintain 5 nautical miles between each of the leaks, distance from each of the leaks. The problem is that the methane lowers the buoyancy of the water. So the water in that entire area is becoming less buoyant because it is saturated with methane. This causes ships to sink just by going into the area. They have also said it's extremely dangerous, and that there is a chance for it to ignite. The Danish Prime Minister has said to the to the Financial Times, quote, "It's too early to conclude, but this is an extraordinary situation. There are 3 leaks. It is difficult to imagine this could be accidental." Again, Swedish Prime Minister said that they believe that this is a act of sabotage. Okay, let's see. So there are 2 leaks in Nord Stream 1 in Swedish and Danish waters. There's 1 leak in Nord Stream 2. They say that these leaks are expected to continue for at least several days, and possibly even a week. Hold on, let me see if I can get the... so I don't know. Does that seem to you that they've cut it off somewhere? Or I mean, it sounds like they're still sending gas up from one end, and I mean, a week is a long time for this thing to be pumping out methane. Jen, are you still there?
Well, there could be a couple of... Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, yep.
Okay. There could be a couple of things. One, I mean, these pipelines carry an enormous volume of gas, and they have to be kept pressurized. So if you test, there's a problem with. So even Nord Stream 2, which isn't actually pressurized, then it should be pressurized. If the pressure drop, because they should have pressure monitors to measure the amount of pressure inside the tank or inside the pipeline. That's how one of the ways that they detect leaks is if there's a drop in pressure, or detect any other number of problems. Is a drop in pressure. The drop in pressure may be small enough that they can maintain an adequate pressure to keep water out of the pipeline. That could be why it could take significant amounts of time while they're
you're
inside the
breaking.
pipeline itself. They may still be supplying it.
All right, that's what it sounds like. So it sounds like they're going to continue to supply it. So I don't know ultimately what the damage is. It may be that this oh well, hey, we may have to scrap the line. That may have been just sort of an initial panicked assessment. We do know that the German Geological Research Institute has also confirmed that there were 2 explosions at the locations where the pressure losses occurred. So it seems like definitely the thinking of the the Polish Prime Minister came out and said that the leaks were an act of sabotage. If there were explosions on 2 separate lines, it strikes me as highly likely that it was sabotage. The Prime Minister of Denmark says that certainly can't be ruled out. It looks like the Kremlin is saying that they believe this was sabotage. I don't think we know what the status is of those lines, so I think we'll have to. Like as I said, and I think we're gonna wrap this up. I am disinclined to think it was Russia. I think there's a 40% chance it's Russia. That's a non-trivial percentage, but Russia loses much more than it gains out of this. These lines, or its leverage against Germany and the EU, if the lines are incapacitated, they lose their biggest bargaining chip with Germany and the EU. They were relying on these lines. They hadn't performed as much as they had hoped already. Germany was going independent on its own and didn't want to be subservient to Russia, which these lines, that's what they were. They were making Russia their masters. Having said that, Russia was counting on a very cold winter to get Germany to change its mind, and that if these lines are damaged to the point where they cannot be used, that is now off the table. As Geo Streber had said, the hostage has essentially been shot, and Russia has lost its biggest bargaining chips. I'm inclined to think this was not Russia. So whoever it was either just pissed at Russia and wanted to damage Russia, or wanted to make it so that Russia could no longer hold these pipes over Germany and or the EU. So my suspicion is that's who it was. There's any number of countries that would fall into that category. Obviously, I think this is going to be thoroughly investigated. A lot of people have a very strong interest in seeing who it was. The Russians, if whoever did this too, is going to draw at a minimum a tremendous amount of ire from Russia. So if it was not Russia, God help if it was either the Americans or any Western country. But it's hard to imagine anybody but a Western country pulling this off. If it wasn't Russia. Again, it's possible a false flag. There are other. We discussed that at the top of the show. I'm not going to go over all of that again, but there's any number of. This is big. This is very big. If the destruction is as bad as the preliminary report suggested, then the hostage is in fact dead, and Russia can no longer hold this pipeline over Germany or the EU. We don't know, as Andring brought some very good reasons why. It seems unlikely that the damage would be that catastrophic. Even if somebody had intimate knowledge of the line, they do brace these lines for significant damage in segments of them. So it's hard to say. We do believe that the methane is going to continue to pour out of this for at least several days, maybe as much as a week. So obviously it's worth keeping an eye on, and we will keep an eye on it for future overtime episodes and see where it is. But I think the question now becomes who did this and why, and I think that could have any number of significant ramifications, but the most immediate ramification is it appears as if Putin has lost his biggest bargaining chip with Germany and the EU. I would imagine Germany is going to seize on this opportunity to push forward even faster towards energy independence, far away from any other country, especially Russia. This is probably reasonably bad news for Russia, but we'll see. At any rate, thank you all for joining us. Is Andrew, were there any final comments you wanted to make before we go? Assuming we still have you. Andrew, you there? All right. At this point, I believe we have lost his Andering. He is still connected, but his signal may be insufficient. So, sorry to have missed you, Isandering. Thank you all for joining us, and we will. We're currently following the hurricane bearing down on Miami right now. It's expected to be the largest in 100 years, and the first direct hit in 100 years to the Miami area. We have seen footage of the sewage systems in Miami and the water pipes backing up already, and they haven't even gotten hit with this thing yet. And it's going to carry a 10-foot storm surge and drop at least 10 inches of rain. So we will keep an eye on that, and we are certainly wishing the residents of Cuba, the residents of Florida, and everyone else who is in the path of this thing, we are wishing them the absolute best. And we'll keep an eye on it. It's going to be a long week. Have a good night, folks. Thank you.